Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a recent reads video for you because it's been a really busy time, plus I haven't had a lot of energy for filming. I have quite a lot of books to talk about today. So I'm actually going to be talking about 20 books today, and I'm not going to talk about all of them in a great deal of detail, partly because I got through a lot of these quite quickly and I don't necessarily have a lot to say about them, but also because there are a lot of them and I don't want this to be a massively long video. I did debate splitting it into two, but I have quite a backlog of videos to edit, so again, I don't want to create too much more work for myself. We're gonna err on the side of keeping it all in one video and hopefully it won't take too long to get through them all. Without further ado, I'm just going to get into the books and I am going to go through these quite quickly. Okay, so the first book I'm talking about today is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is the first in a series called the Neapolitan novels, translated from Italian. I began reading this as an ebook from the library and then the ebook returned itself. You may remember if you've watched my ebook eradicator vlog. So I ended up getting a physical copy from the library to finish it. I really enjoyed this. It's set in kind of 1950s Naples and follows Lena. She's one of the more intelligent people in her school. She has a best friend called Lila. It's kind of quite a competitive friendship, so Lena pushes herself to do things because she wants to do better than Lila. This first book follows them up into the age of about 16, 17. The rest of the series follows as they grow older. So I really enjoyed this. I thought the descriptions of the friendships were really apt. I found Lena quite a relatable character and I could really understand where she was coming from a lot of the time. And I just thought it was a really interesting picture of that era and that place that I didn't know a lot about. I'm going to say now as well, I'm not going to be giving out content warnings because I don't remember them all for any of these books. I know there were quite a few for this book in particular. So what I will do is I will be linking to the Book Trigger Warnings website for any of the books that feature so that you can check if these books are safe for you to read. I also recommend Storygraph. Their content warning system is really robust. So if you need or if you would like a book tracking website to help you track your books and to help you find new books to read, then Storygraph is a really good one because it gives you the ability to add content warnings as you review books and also to check content warnings before you read books. So next book that I finished was The Starlight Barking by Dodie Smith. This is the second book in the 101 Dalmatians duology. I'm going to say it now, it is just these two books in this series. I'll explain why in a minute. So this was very weird, and if you've watched the Disney films and the Disney sequels, they bear no resemblance to this book whatsoever. I picked up this series because of my friend Judith from Deca Book Reviews, and she's just as encouraging as many people to read this book as possible because it is weird. I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first book. It's just a bit strange. I'm not going to tell you any more than that because I want you to read it for yourself and uncover the weirdness for yourself. But yeah, it was weird. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. Oh, I gave My Brilliant Friend 4 stars. I should have said that. I gave this one 3 stars. It's not a bad book and I would read it again. And if I have kids one day, I will read it to them and see what they think of it. But yeah, don't go in expecting more Cruella de Vil for a start. She is mentioned, but she doesn't really feature. And don't really expect it to be anything like the first book because it isn't. The next book that I finished was The Ginny Key by Bethany Atazadeh. This is the second book in the Stolen Kingdom series and this was a reread for me. We read the first book for Space Sirens Book Club. These are a series of fairy tale retellings that are kind of woven together. So the first one is an Aladdin retelling, this one is a Little Mermaid retelling, but it picks up kind of halfway through the narrative of the first book and fills in the gap. So the main character it follows in this one is Rena, who is kind of the Little Mermaid character. She appears in the first book, so this kind of explains how she gets involved in what's happening in the first book and then carries on the story. So I really like these books. I like Bethany Atazadeh's writing style. I like what she does with these stories. This one probably isn't my favourite in the series, although I did enjoy it more on the reread. Rena is a little bit irritating at times, but I kind of get why from the way that her story is framed in these books. The next book in the series, The Cursed Hunter, is my favourite one so far. So I'm going to be trying to get to that soon, rereading that. And then the 4th book has come out this year, so I want to try and catch up on this series and finish it soon. Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about that one. I gave that one 4 stars, which I think is what I gave it the first time I read it as well. Yeah, the next book that I finished was Midnight Kittens by Dodie Smith. This is often listed as the 3rd book in the 101 Dalmatians series. It has nothing to do with that series at all. It's not in any way a sequel. I think it's maybe set in a similar location. It's set in the same county of England, but other than that, there is no link. There is no reason to read this if you want more Dalmatian goodness. It's nothing to do with that. It is a standalone. It is not part of that series. I'm just going to clarify that one more time. This is really fun. It follows a set of twins called Pam and Tom who live with their grandmother, and they've just come back from school. They are at kind of a boarding school. It's like set in like the 50s maybe, I'm not entirely sure. One night their grandmother's gone to bed and they have stayed up to look for hedgehogs that have been visiting the garden, but instead of hedgehogs they see 4 kittens and they don't know where these kittens have come from. The kittens seem quite magical. They want to try and find out where these kittens have come from. There is also another storyline about an old stately home which is not very far from where their grandmother lives. It's about to be adapted into a hotel, so it's been open to the public very briefly, and so there's another storyline to do with that. The way it all ties together I thought was really sweet, really clever, and I just thought this was quite a charming book. So if you are a fan of Dodie Smith's writing, if you liked 101 Dalmatians, you will enjoy this. Just don't expect it to be about dogs when it's about cats. I'm just going to briefly mention 2 books, but I'm not really going to say anything about them. So the next book, and not the one after, but the one after that I read, were 2 that I was just trying to clear from my shelves essentially. So there were 2 books I bought when I was a youth worker which are about church youth work, and I'd read bits of them when I was a youth worker but never quite finished them, so I just wanted to kind of quickly read through them because I thought they would be quick to read. So one was called FAQs and the other one was called No Guts, No Glory. So FAQs was edited by Allison Mitchell and No Guts, No Glory was edited by Alan Stewart. Yeah, they're both kind of an introduction to how to like run Christian youth groups, events, recruit volunteers and all that sort of thing. When I was a youth worker and was like fairly new to the role, that was quite useful stuff, but I don't really need that information anymore, so I read these really quickly. I've donated them to the college library secondhand book sale. For anyone that is going into church leadership but doesn't have experience of youth work, it might be quite a useful thing for them to read. In between those 2 I finished Tales from the Cafe by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the 2nd book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. I read the first book a couple of years ago and it was one of my favourite books that year. I have a review for it which I will link for you, which is actually my most watched video on BookTube, which is surprising because reviews often don't do that well, but I think there's also a film based on the book, so I think I get quite a lot of hits on that video that way. Anyway, well, that's beside the point. The concept of this book is there's a cafe where you can travel through time, but you have to stay in the cafe. So you can go backwards or forwards in time to visit the cafe on another date and time. So you can therefore only meet with people that have been in the cafe. You have to return to the present before the coffee gets cold or you get stuck. There's a lot more rules to it than that. I class it as science fiction, but it's kind of loose science fiction, so maybe more speculative fiction. Or I actually have listed as speculative fiction on my list. This book follows 4 more characters who travel through time in the cafe, but also gives a bit more background to some of the regulars in the cafe. So I really liked it. I really recommend this series. I really enjoy this series for kind of quite gentle time travel. So long as you aren't too worried about the science behind it, you'll probably enjoy it. Go and check out my review for the first book and check out the series because I think it is a really good one. I just realised I haven't been giving ratings for a lot of these books and I don't even care. So the next book I finished was Happy Fat by Sophie Hagen. I borrowed this as an ebook from the library. Sophie Hagen is a Danish comedian. She is non-binary, but she isn't particularly fussed about pronouns, so I will probably use she and they interchangeably because I always forget. This book is their memoir about their relationship to their body and to food, from growing up in Denmark as a child in kind of quite a complex family situation where food was used, it was kind of weaponized, through to her experiences as a fat person. I think she wrote this before she came out as non-binary, so she does refer to herself as female in the book, but there's a lot you can tell from her experiences with her body, kind of you can get that sense of dysphoria. So she talks a lot about her relationship to her body and coming to terms with her size. She talks a lot about some of the misconceptions about fatness, and particularly about fatness as related to health, that you can be healthy and plus sized, and that actually a lot of thin people aren't healthy, but we just assume that size is an indicator of health. So for me, that was a really profound thing, really, because I have a lot of issues with my weight. I don't always have a great relationship to food. It's really helped me work through some of my own weirdness about food and about my body. So I thought it was really a great book. She also interviews a number of other fat people with different intersectionalities. So she talks to one trans person, a couple of people of colour, and one person with profound disabilities, and gets them to reflect on their own experiences of their bodies and their size and how those intersect. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it's actually a really important book for anyone to read who is interested in, she calls it the fat liberation movement as opposed to the body positivity movement, and she explains why she doesn't like body positivity as a catch-all phrase. A lot of really interesting, helpful information and a lot of personal anecdotes from her about her experiences. So I really enjoyed that one, and as I remember to say it, I gave that one 4 stars. I couldn't even tell you for the ones that I missed what I rated them, because I can't remember which ones I said and didn't, so I'm not going to go back and fill it in. Carrying on, the next book that I finished was A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a novella. It's the first in a new series called Monk and Robot, and I really loved this. This follows sibling Dex, who is a monk, and Moss, who is a robot, and in their society there's been no interactions between humans and robots for a couple of centuries until Dex encounters Moss. Dex is a tea monk, but they have kind of become dissatisfied with their life and their work, and they are trying to find more meaning in their life, so they decide to go to visit an old monastery, but it's off the beaten track, like no one goes there anymore, so it's a bit of an effort for them to get there. On the way they meet Moss, who is a robot, and it's a really profound encounter. So there was a lot that I really liked about this book, a lot to do with finding meaning in life and calling and how we serve and support each other. So it's one that even though it's a bit odd in some senses, it's one that I would probably recommend to some of my colleagues that I'm training with for an understanding of what priesthood is and what it should look like. But I really love this, and I'm looking forward to more from the series coming out in the future. And I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I finished was called Letter to Lilly by Funmi. This was a collection of poetry, and I really enjoyed it. I read it as an ebook. It was an arc from NetGalley, so I can't flick through and tell you the titles of ones that I like the best. I'm going to be reviewing it soon-ish. I have another book that I'm partway through that I'm going to pair it up with to review, because I think they would work well together in a double review. But yeah, I just thought the language, the imagery used was really powerful, and I really enjoyed this little collection of poetry. It's only about 50 pages, so if you like poetry, definitely worth checking out. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I finished was Pylon People by Cath Woolridge. I'm not going to talk loads about this one either. This was a collection of 40 days of kind of Bible study, devotional essay type things with reflections on pylons and using that imagery of power and connectivity and how that can impact on your faith and daily life. My friend Ree gave this to me. We actually both used to work with Cath Woolridge when we were interns at a church in Cardiff, so it was quite cool to read something she's written. I could actually hear her strong Welsh accent in my head as I was reading it, which was quite nice, and I quite enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and it is one that I'll go back to every couple of years and work through it again. It's really beautifully illustrated as well, and you have the option of like scribbling in it, but I don't really like to do that, so I did kind of transfer some of the images into my own journal and used it that way. But yeah, I thought it was really good, and I do recommend. The next book that I finished was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I read this as an audiobook. I don't read a lot of audiobooks, but if I've read the book before, or at least know enough about the story, I can follow them well enough. I struggle to concentrate on audiobooks. This one, I think I must have read it as a kid, but I don't have any record of having read it before, but I know I used to have a copy of it, so I must have read it at some point. It was also in a musical version of it when I was a teenager, so I was fairly confident that I would follow it well enough. And also it's a bit of a nonsense book, so it doesn't matter if you space out for a few moments because it's a load of nonsense anyway, in a good way. Quite enjoyed this. I gave it it 4 stars as well. I think you're probably all familiar enough with the story. Alice follows a white rabbit down a rabbit hole and encounters a lot of strange and wonderful creatures. I think there's also Through the Looking Glass as well, isn't there, which I don't think I ever have actually read, so I'll probably have to read that at some point. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that one. The next book that I read was When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore, who is a Latinx non-binary author. This was my first time reading one of their books, so there was a lot in this book to do with identity, how we see ourselves. This is magical realism as well, so quite a lot of magical elements woven into a slightly surreal plot. There was a lot that I really loved about this. The 2 main characters were quite endearing, Sam and Miel. I love the whole concept of these 4 sisters, the Bonner sisters, who kind of have cast a spell over the town and they always get their way, and Miel and Sam start to stand up to them and a lot of different wonderful things happen. I also really loved Miel's guardian who she lives with. So Miel was found in a water tower when she was about, I don't know, 7 or 8, I think. And so she comes under the care of, I'm not quite sure how to say this name, so apologies if I'm saying this wrong, but I would say Araceli, I think is the name. And she cures people of lovesickness. And I just thought that was a really, there's just so many lovely concepts in this book. So I really love the writing style, and I'm a bit cross on myself that it's taken me a while to wake up to Anna Marie McLemore's writing. They have a number of different books out, and so I'm really keen now to get some more of them because I really liked the whole style, the writing style, the concept, the magical realism, the genre, everything just worked for me. So I really enjoyed this. I'm really glad I read it. It's kind of more an autumnal book. It has a bit of a Halloweeny feel. There's a lot of talk about pumpkins. So I'd recommend it if you're looking for something like not necessarily spooky but autumnal for your October reading. That would be a good time to read this book. I gave this one I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read Decoding Da Vinci by N.T. Wright. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. It's very thin. I picked this up from the secondhand book cupboard in the college library because it is tangentially linked to the research I'm going to be starting in the autumn. So this was looking at the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown and kind of unpicking some of what is claimed as fact but is actually not in that book. So it's a very short little pamphlet just unpicking some of that stuff. And it was relatively interesting, but not as linked to my research as I thought it was going to be, but enough that I will probably refer back to it at some point. The next book I finished was Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. This is non-fiction. It's kind of a loosely linked collection of essays to do with activism and how, while everything can seem really terrible, actually there is progress and good things happening because of people taking an interest and actually doing something about the problems that they see in society. This was first published in 2005 and then was reprinted. This particular edition was reprinted in 2016 with a few additional chapters. So there's a little bit of talk about pacifism and the resistance to the Iraq War, and then some of the later chapters are starting to look more at climate change as kind of a current issue. But I found this really interesting, really helpful actually. It did help me have a bit more hope about some of the kind of world situations and some of the stuff that's going on in the world that can seem quite hopeless, but there are people doing stuff about it, and actually anything that we do towards a positive is helpful in that sense. So yeah, I really liked it, really recommend it. I think I gave it 4 stars. The next book I finished was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This is set in Nigeria and it follows 2 sisters, Korede, who is a nurse, and Ayula, who is her younger sister, who has a habit of accidentally killing her boyfriends and expecting Korede to clear up after her. And then Ayula starts dating one of Korede's colleagues who she has a bit of a crush on herself, and it just makes the whole thing a lot more complicated. So this was really fun, which feels weird to say about a book about a serial killer, but it was. I really enjoyed the character dynamic, the study of human nature and relationships, and so kind of that exploration of family loyalty and what that means, and the reflection on how their childhood impacted on them as adults and led to this kind of dependency that they have on each other. So I thought this was really, really good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It wasn't quite a perfect book for me, but I really did really enjoy it. So I really do highly recommend it. Don't be put off by the title. It's not about the killing so much as a relationship between the sisters. Yeah, so I gave it 4 stars and would definitely recommend it. The next book I finished was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, which I had out from the library and I've already taken it back. This is set in the 1990s and it follows the interaction of 2 families in a town called Shaker Heights, which is quite kind of structured. Everyone has a place and everyone is expected to behave in a certain way. So when the Warren family arrive in town, and Nia Warren is an artist, she's a photographer, she has quite a transient life, she doesn't follow society's rules. She and her daughter Pearl really affect the relationships of everyone around them, particularly of this rich family whose name I can't remember. I only read it a couple of days ago and it's just, that information has not stayed in my brain. I thought this was brilliant. I really loved this. I gave it 5 stars. I thought, again, as a character study, it was a really interesting look at family dynamics, particularly the daughter, the youngest daughter of the rich family, Izzy, for me was a brilliant character because of the way her mother related to her and the way she reacted to that. Because she was born prematurely, there was kind of an overprotective nature from her mother when she was a child, which led to just a real criticism of everything that Izzy was and does. So I thought it was really brilliant. A lot of themes about family, fertility, adoption, and who do we count as someone's real parents, but there was a lot more to it than that. I didn't really know anything about this book before reading it, other than that it had been adapted into a TV series, which I'm hopefully going to watch at some point now I've read it. And I like doing that. I like to not know a lot about a book before I start reading it, because it just meant I was constantly surprised by this book. I was not expecting kind of any way that the story went. I found it really fascinating and I really enjoyed it, and had no hesitations giving it 5 stars. Next I'm going to talk about 2 books from a series that I've read. So I did read a book in between these, but it just makes sense to talk about them together. So we've got the next 2 books from the Paddington series I hadn't read, so Paddington Marches On and Paddington at Work. These are books 6 and 7 of the Paddington series. I'm not going to talk a lot about these because I am going through the series. I have talked a lot about my love for Paddington Bear and my love for these books. I don't think I'd read these books specifically before, but because I have watched all of the old TV series, I was very familiar with a number of the stories in these books, and I just think he's a very endearing character. I really love these books. They're quite nostalgic for me. Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about them than that. And then finally, the final book that I'm going to talk about that I read in between the 2 Paddington books was called Maxi by Coralina Subroca. Hopefully I've said that right, apologies if I haven't. So this was an arc I had from NetGalley. The book came out I think in June, I can't remember exactly, but I will be doing a full review of it soon, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it right now because that review will be coming. This was another kind of speculative fiction one. Maxi, the title character, is kind of a like celestial being. They come in groups of 100 to try and restore balance to human society. 50 of them are kind of good and 50 of them are kind of bad, in the sense of the good ones kind of try and steer people towards better behaviour, try and resolve conflict, and the bad ones kind of try and create conflict, but all with the intention of preventing humanity from destroying itself. Maxi has kind of an end goal of bringing 3 teenagers together and resolving an issue with them, and I can't really explain that any more than that without it being a massive spoiler for the end of the book. But these 3 teenagers are all from quite troubled backgrounds. Maxi kind of steers these 3 characters together. She also is working to improve the life of a homeless man called Joseph through her interactions with him as well. So I thought this was a really clever way to look at some of the issues in society, such as homelessness and homophobia and drug addiction and immigration, and kind of bring a slightly different perspective on those things by using a character who is outside of the ordinary. So I thought this was really cleverly written. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads because you can't do half stars. It was closer to a 3.5 star for me, but because it's self-published by the author and it didn't have a lot of reviews, I decided to bump it up a bit by giving it the extra star. So I rounded it up. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit more about it when I do a full review for it soon. That is all the books that I'm going to be talking about today. And let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or let me know if you'd like to read any of them based on what I've said. Let me know some of what you've been reading recently, or if you just want to let me know that you've been here, you can leave me a moon emoji in the comments for When the Moon Was Ours, which was one of my favourite books that I read recently. So just leave that in the comments if you want to let me know that you've been here. You can also like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!